Bowl season's been going on for a couple weeks now, but the SEC's yet to play a game. That'll all change tonight as Missouri will take on Texas in the Texas Bowl in what could be Drew Lock's final game as a Missouri Tiger. Also, New Year's Day Bowl games, the Sugar and Rose Bowl, Alabama, as well as Clemson, Oklahoma, and Georgia have all arrived for their big games coming up. We'll break them down next on SEC Country Live. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Welcome into SEC Country Live. I am not Brandon Adams. My name is Hans Heiser. I'm filling in for BA. We'll tell you where he is in just a second. But this gentleman here, you see him every day on SEC Country Live. The All-American Mike Johnson. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too, man. Hope you, everybody out there had a Merry Christmas. A little bit of technical difficulties earlier, so appreciate everybody hanging out with us. But should be a fun hour. A lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of catching up to do because we took a couple days off. So action-packed show for sure.
Yeah, we did. The guy who messed up the thing, he's gone now. We've relieved him of his duties.
We fired him.
We have some competent people behind the glass running the show now, so we don't expect any more interruptions throughout the program. Do appreciate you guys making us part of your afternoon. Plenty to get to. I did say we'll tell you where Brandon Adams is. We just talked to him. He's sitting in traffic in Los Angeles. He's out, of course, for the Rose Bowl. He's going to be covering us each and every day. Shows live there from the morning as we get ready for the big Georgia game coming up here in less than a week, 5 days away. And we'll talk to BA on the phone about 15 minutes from now, get his take. He's going to Disneyland with the team today.
I was going to say,
let your imagination run wild.
Don't feel too sorry for BA today sitting in traffic. He's in California. It's probably about 72 degrees, and he's headed to Disneyland, so good day for him.
We do encourage you guys to be a part of our show. Of course, you're viewing us on Facebook Live. Be sure to put your comments in there. Mike will be sure to get to those. He's already briefed me on some of you guys, at least warned me about some of your behaviors and tendencies, so we'll keep an eye on that. But again, thank you for being part of the show. Let's go ahead and get the ball rolling.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, Terrence Collins is only already in the comment section saying, I'm just here to give Mike a hard time since BA isn't here. Listen, you guys have at it, man. I'm here to be target practice for you guys today. I'm going to try to work comment section as best I could. I see you guys already rolling in. So
yeah, I see him coming in right now. I'm going to leave that one alone, okay? If you want to address some of these with the vulgarity and stuff, that's up to you. I'm just substitute teaching today. All right, let's get it going. We'll go ahead and take a look at our first and 10. Number one today, SEC Bowl season finally starts. We've been watching college football for the last couple weeks. Mishmash. You get some competitive games, not so much. And real quick, before we get into this, as a former player, obviously, your bowl games were a little different because you guys were playing for something.
That's right.
Yeah, but these guys, you know, like the game last night, Kansas State, UCLA, it's got to be kind of hard for the coaches in what's primarily a very emotional sport as is to get these kids geared up. And that's not including all the stuff, all the gift bags and the family and all the other distractions that come with it.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's gotten tougher over time. You know, these guys now go to these bowl games, and everybody's thinking about their future. But, you know, listen, I spent a few different Christmases with my other family, at these bowl sites. I spent a couple of Christmases in Shreveport, Louisiana.
I'm sorry.
We did a little bit of all. You know, you go out there and you get some of the bowl gifts, but you do your best to prepare because obviously these programs are trying to trend in the right direction and trying to do the same things they've done all season, just doing it in a different place. And these bowl wins are a big deal historically. I don't think they're as much of a big deal now, especially since we've gone to the playoff format, in my opinion. But you try to do as good as you can. You point everything in the right direction, and you try to put in a couple of good weeks of practice and try to enjoy what's going on in front of you.
Well, I think tonight the motivating factor for the Missouri Tigers is the fact that they've won 6 in a row, led by their offense. I mean, Drew Lock's putting up video game numbers at this point. And I thought it was very interesting. Barry owed him a couple of things. We'll talk about what he did in the middle of the season, the whole taking a match to the season, is the way they started off and how they turned it around. I think he saw the way the schedule was shaping up and there's an opportunity there to win some football games. Well, they did that, and they lost their offensive coordinator. We'll talk about that. But he said that they're preparing for this game like it's a national championship game, and we know it's not, but the motivation there for this football team, it's there. This is a big football game for Missouri.
It is, and you're talking about a football team that, listen, I had already dug a grave for Barry Odom's career midway through the season. Yeah, we were ready to send him back, and we were saying, you know what, there's no way this guy can get it turned around. We kind of threw him in on top of the pile with the rest of the SEC coaches we figured would get fired at season's end, and give him credit. He definitely turns things around in the 6-game winning streak. They're going to play a tough Texas team in the bowl game today, but I think they have the weapons to be able to get it done. We mentioned before the season, listen, this is an action-packed offense, a good offensive line, a lot of talent out wide, a lot of talent in the backfield, and Drew Lock has put up the right numbers and done the right things down the stretch to get this point in the right direction. I have to admit to you, I think this trend continues. Not a lot of people are giving Missouri a ton of credit for this game tonight, but Texas, I think, is in for a rude awakening if they think they're going to roll over Missouri.
Hey, listen, Texas has got 3 guys sitting out that are going to go play in the National Football League. That's a whole nother conversation for another show. As a guy who played on both levels, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's okay. To me, the bowl games to me meant something else when I was in college. But I can't take away from somebody else that wants to provide for their family or that sees an opportunity to really not just get money for their kids, but grandkids' money. Some of these guys are going to get $10 million, $20 million guaranteed. Nobody can question that for them. Some of these guys come from extremely humble beginnings. We talked about this last year with Leonard Fournette. We've talked about this a couple of times this year in terms of guys that are doing it now. I can't knock them. Now, I don't know that I would give them a ticket on the team plane. I don't know that I'd be, having the guys hype him up on the sideline or having him be a part of all the pregame festivities. Hey, if you don't want to be a part of the team, then go train for the draft. Let us be alone. Let us continue to prepare the way we're going to. But if anybody wants to skip the bowl game, especially if they're a first or second round pick, I can't fault them for that. Now, I do think there is some damage to be done. For some of these guys that are fringe, like 4th and 5th round picks, to me, I think they could do a lot more good playing in the bowl game than the bad getting injured. But that's a personal decision. I'm not in their shoes, and I can't fault them for the decision they have made.
Yeah, we'll talk about a couple of those players coming up here in just a bit. Some of their decisions to stay in school in the SEC or to go pro. One of them with Ole Miss, he didn't have to make the decision for a bowl game. The decision pretty much took care of himself. But I think this game is pretty intriguing. When you look at the other SEC games, we know about the New Year's Day. We know about the Notre Dame-LSU matchup. We're going to break down a little bit today of the Peach Bowl here in Atlanta. Some interesting trash talk going on with the 2 fan bases there. But I think outside of that, the other ones, I think this one's a little bit more interesting to me personally, just because of where Missouri was, where they are. Drew Lock's decision of whether or not he's going to go pro. There's some talk about him making a decision after this game, whether or not he's going to go pro. And then, of course, to me, the biggest question in this football game is how are they going to play offensively without Josh Heupel calling the plays?
I think it's an interesting way to look at things if you are a Missouri fan. They've got to turn a corner. I mean, we can give Barry Odom all the credit, and he deserves a lot of it. But Josh Heupel has had a dynamic offense for the last 6 games, and now all of a sudden he's gone. He's going to be headed to UCF. You got all the things going on with this team. And Barry Odom has to become the defensive coordinator that got the head coaching job in the first place. He's got to start coaching this team into a different direction. And you mentioned it. This is to me, one of the sexier matchups of bowl season in terms of SEC teams. The whole Big 12 thing coming back into focus. There's going to be a couple bowl games tomorrow of SEC teams. You're going to get Texas A&M and Wake Forest, Kentucky Northwestern. Nothing to me really carries the weight. Until we get to New Year's Day, nothing carries quite the weight that this old Big 12 matchup does, and it's going to be interesting to see it play out on the field.
The huge rivalry that is the Aggies and the Demon Deacons. 2 schools that have never played one another in the history of each other's storied programs. So when you look at the bowl games of the Southeastern Conference, which one do you feel the most confident in as far as an SEC team winning over a non-SEC opponent?
You know what's crazy? This is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but I look at these bowl games to me, and the saying has always been the defense wins championships. I look at some of these strong defenses, and I'm really, really confident that Georgia is going to win their game against Oklahoma. I know that people, that's crazy. Oklahoma's the #1 team, or the number 2 team in the country. Georgia, this. Listen, I'm just telling you right now, I've seen these matchups play out between SEC defenses and Big 12 offenses. I played in 4 of them when I was in college. All these matchups, I played against Texas, played against Oklahoma State. The defenses almost always come out on top of these games. Now, Baker Mayfield's the Heisman Trophy winner for a reason, can throw it over the top. But I think when you talk about the speed of Georgia's defense, I always believe in these matchups at the end of the year that the defenses will get it done. And right now, in my opinion, Georgia's got one of the best in the country.
Yeah, I always think about that kickoff classic game with Alabama and Michigan. You were gone by then?
Gone by then,
You were gone by then. Everybody was talking about shoelaces and shoelaces. But poor shoelaces, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not comparing Baker Mayfield to him, but I use that game as a point because the talk was all about Michigan's dynamic offense. And we'll talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield coming up here in just a second. For me, as far as the games go, I think Alabama, I know that it's a tough game against Clemson, but I think to beat them 2 years in a row, especially the way things ended, you give them a little bit extra time to prepare, to get healthy. I know you like to hear me say this,
absolutely,
but I'm very confident that Alabama wins this game. Another guy who's going on the record, we'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show, made a bold proclamation about that game. We'll break that down a little bit later on, but I honestly believe Alabama, I don't know that they bring the wood, but they find a way to win the game coming up here in a week.
Well, there you have it. A guy that went to Alabama is picking on Georgia. And
Let's go home.
Georgia guy, there we go. feeling confident about each other's squads. And I think there's some just to that. Listen, I don't know what you're going to get out of LSU's game against Notre Dame. I don't know what you're going to get, from Auburn that's playing UCF. UCF's a good team. Auburn, they have a lot of people that are looking at NFL opportunities. You never know what you're going to get with some of these coaching staffs that are changing or some of these. Right. It's hard for me to look at it. I know this. That Georgia and Alabama are both playing for keeps. These teams both want championships. So it's a little bit easier to look at the dynamics of the game and say this team will win or this team will win. So I think that makes it a little bit easier to kind of try to project what we think about the games.
You talked about Georgia being confident against their game against Oklahoma. I'll tell you one thing. They went out there and they went there with style. Georgia Bulldogs arrived in Pasadena yesterday. Brandon Adams coming up in about 10 minutes. We'll talk to him. He's out there with the team going to Disneyland. But we have some shots of them arriving out in Pasadena yesterday as both Alabama arrives in New Orleans and Georgia taking on Oklahoma. But Georgia, to me, we'll get that shot for you in just a second. There was an interesting article I read, Steve Hummer in the AJC, interviewing Lorenzo Carter, a couple other the Georgia senior-laden defense, right, upperclassmen. And Lorenzo Carter said that, there you go, there they are getting off the bus.
Looks like Brandon Adams right there.
There he is, there's BA.
He might be the first guy getting off the bus.
But this is the bus from the plane. The plane was ridiculous. You can go on YouTube, go online and check it out. It's unlike any plane I've ever been on. Maybe Mike's been on. Here they are. But
the 747, I think, right there. That's nice.
Man, look at this. They got their own pods.
Yeah.
Gatorade, Powerade there. Sorry, Coca-Cola.
I'm going to tell you right now, listen, we didn't fly with this kind of class when I went out to Pasadena for the national title game. We had to leave from a smaller airport in Tuscaloosa, so we actually split up planes. We flew on 2 different Delta planes. We couldn't fly. These guys going over to Hartsfield-Jackson, getting on the 747. There's only like 2 747s left in Delta's fleet, and these guys are getting one of them. But man, they got the Georgia G everywhere and the flags. They are definitely
it's all about recruiting and image. And I'm telling you, these kids today, they see something like this, they're sitting at home, they're going, I'm going to Georgia, man. Yeah. Look at that plane. Yeah. That is unbelievable. So they went out there with style. They are there. They're practicing. Games 5 days away. And Baker Mayfield, of course, Heisman Trophy winner. We know all his accolades, some of it antics on and off the field. Here's what I can tell you, and you as a former athlete, tell me if you ever grew up with a guy like this. We all had a guy who was so good at what he did, but he let everybody know about it.
Yeah.
But everybody every once in a while would have an off day.
Yeah.
And I got a guy I compete against. I play basketball 4 days a week. This guy played college ball, and as soon as he starts chirping, I know I'm in for a long day.
That's right.
And so Lorenzo Carter in this interview, he says, my job is to keep him from talking. Our defense is to keep Baker Mayfield from talking, because when we watch his highlights, all he is running around the field, grabbing himself, telling everybody how great he is. We can't let that get going.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because it's almost like a snowball effect. When you talk about a guy like Baker Mayfield and, he completes a pass and then he dumps one off and then he runs for a first down and he throws a touchdown pass and all of a sudden he comes back to the sideline, maybe 7-0, 7-7, and we talk about this game and some of the early things offensively. I think it's a big deal. And so when you start to get that effect, try not to let him get into the zone, quote unquote, or start blinking. For anybody that plays video games, you don't want him to get in that mindset. So I think it's it's definitely a special feeling for this defense to attack in that way.
Well, the guy who I think about immediately this comes to mind is Cam Newton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Immediately. Yeah. Because you saw Cam in the Super Bowl. We've seen games in Cam in the NFL. And then on the other side of that, when things are going well, I don't know if you saw the wheel route play against Green Bay with Clay Matthews a couple weeks ago. He's having fun. He's out there talking trash. Green Bay gets wiped off the field. So I think there's a little bit of truth to that. And Lorenzo Carter, some of these upperclassmen that came back to be a part of this defense, it's important, Mike, to have those upperclassmen to kind of keep everybody grounded. Yeah, you're on a cool plane. Yeah, we're in LA. Yeah, but listen, we're here to win a football game. Talk about the preparation and getting your mind right for a big game like that.
It's a business trip. And Brandon and I have talked about this a couple of different times, that I'm almost excited for Georgia that they get out of the Southeast and head to the West Coast. They're going to head out. They're going to get on this West Coast. They're going to be in Pasadena. They're going to do different things out there. They don't have to be subjected to some of the things they're going to get in New Orleans or Atlanta or some of these other teams in the Southeast. They're getting away from everything. And so I think that senior leadership, that gives them an opportunity to step up.
Right. So, how about the turnaround? Now, you never had a college football playoff deal where you have to play a game and then all of a sudden you got to turn around and less than a week ago you got to go play an animal of a team, whether it's Clemson or Alabama. Is there going to be something said for, and this is not an indictment on Oklahoma, But I feel like the winner of the Georgia-Oklahoma game is going to be an advantage in the national championship game because of the physicality of that other semifinal in New Orleans.
Right. I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at that. And I mentioned, listen, I think Georgia's defense gives them an upper hand in this game. But there is essentially a way of looking at that. Listen, I didn't play in a semifinal game, but I played in a 1 versus 2 matchup in the SEC championship game against a physical Florida team. And that was one of the best Florida teams of all time. They're on the verge of their own dynasty, and really a dynasty under Urban Meyer, and we're able to kind of take that and carry that momentum. I think there is something to be said for that. I think it can be used in a positive way, but I think it can also be used in a negative way, and I think the leadership from these teams have to kind of manage the way they're coming out of both of these semifinal matchups and understanding there's not a month to prepare anymore, not at the SEC title game. This gives you 1 week. Alabama's been there before. Georgia hasn't, and so I think there is a lot of different dynamics in that category.
Do we have BA hanging on? He's ready to roll? All right, let's bring him on. Brandon Adams, host of SEC Country Live here each and every day, is live to us right now in Pasadena, California, probably still sitting on the 10 somewhere. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing very well. I'm actually doing a very California thing at the moment. I am about to go get in line and get me a little In-N-Out burger here. So it is about as California as it gets for me at the moment.
I love it, BA, and man, we miss your brother. And listen, the comment section's already lit up with BA stuff. Tyler Mann just said he bets you already have your Mickey Mouse ears on today. I wouldn't doubt it for 1 second that you're already loving it. Tell me about some of the plans you got out there, what the team's going to be doing, what you're going to be doing with Dog Nation, and I hope you're enjoying it, man. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and hope you're having fun out there.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too, Mike. We've had a great holiday season. We are enjoying it thus far. We are actually, speaking of mouse ears, we're really just a few blocks away from Disneyland. We are going to be at Disneyland here in a few minutes. It's kind of the first official Rose Bowl week event, sort of a welcome to Pasadena moment for both Georgia and Oklahoma. So we're going to cover that. Kirby Smart's going to speak in a little bit. Nick Chubb's going to speak. Jake Fromm's going to speak. Obviously, Baker Mayfield and Lincoln Riley, some of the Oklahoma folks, are going to be speaking here as well. That's kind of like the first media availability of the week, and then from there, it just kind of gets rolling with a lot of practices for Georgia. I know they've already practiced today and heading over to Disneyland. So we're kind of watching that unfold. And really, you know, what's been amazing to me about this week thus far is, or the day that I've been here, kind of starting the week, is, you know, just how big the magnitude of this game feels. I mean, it really does. You know, they call it the granddaddy of them all, and thus far, I mean, it does definitely have the feeling of just a much bigger football game than any of these Georgia players have ever played before. I know y'all were kind of touching on that a moment ago.
Brandon, Bo Molinari on our comments page says to get a double in animal-style fries, whatever that means.
I think he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Animal-style fries. Brandon Adams with us live from Pasadena as we get you set for the Rose Bowl. What are they saying out there as far as ticket sales go? Obviously, the game sold out. There was speculation early on just by the flight demand and the ticket demand coming out of the University of Georgia and some of their alumni that it was going to be a pro-Georgia atmosphere. Is that still the sentiment out there?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I think the tickets themselves are probably the most accessible part of this entire trip for the average fan, whether you be a Georgia fan or an Oklahoma fan. The tough thing, and Hans, you know this, Mike, I know you know this, the tough thing is the travel, right? I mean, if you can get to California, you can find tickets to the game. They may be a couple $100s, but you're going to be able to find them. Whereas, you know, almost any kind of airfare anywhere near L.A. or Pasadena has been virtually non-existent. Even some of the surrounding cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas and San Diego, they've also been kind of sort of taken over as well by folks trying to get in for this game. And that's probably the biggest judge of all about how many Georgia fans are going to be here, is just how much difficulty there's been even trying to find a flight in. You know, I haven't seen a ton of the folks yet. It's only still pretty early on in the week, but as I was getting ready to make my way over to Anaheim for the event today, you were already starting to see some Georgia fans kind of pop up and show up. So, you know, the same way there were tens upon tens of thousands in Chicago and South Bend for the Notre Dame game earlier this year, you get the impression it's going to be something at least similar to that here at the Rose Bowl this week.
B.A., talk to me a little bit about the demeanor of the team. And you and I, for the last couple of weeks, have talked about that trip to Pasadena and how this is unlike any other bowl game where you get to go to the site, but it's still a business trip, still means a lot. Have you had a chance to interact with any of the players or at least see any of the players and understand how the demeanor is from some of these guys? And if they are looking at it, obviously, like a business trip?
A lot of what I've seen thus far has been on video, whether it be the video that Georgia released of the team on the plane or some of the video that I've seen. Their hotel's only a couple blocks from my hotel, but you know what I've seen from them in terms of getting on the bus, going to practice, and things like that. And you know, Mike, I'm going to say this from the perspective of a fan for a moment. You know, obviously there's this need to maintain a business trip mindset. You're here for a reason. You're here to, win a game and go play for the national championship. But speaking as a fan, I definitely got a little nervous when I saw how nice all of this is. The plane that Georgia flew in on, so nice. I mean, one of the most luxurious things you've ever seen in terms of those guys kind of getting to kick back and relax. And obviously, sort of treated like a rock star, going to and from the hotel here and there. And I will admit that it just seems difficult to maintain the, hey, this is a game just like any other, and we're here for a reason, this is a business trip, when you were just sort of lavished with all of this attention and all of these niceties. And things that Georgia, by the way, deserves. I mean, they ought to get a chance to enjoy this once-in-a-lifetime trip, and I think it's a great commercial for the program. But I have to admit, being here on the scene and watching the way that Georgia's getting treated, and Oklahoma is the same thing too, but I'm going to say this from the perspective of Georgia here, of course, it seems a little easier said than done to sort of maintain the business trip atmosphere and attitude, given the fact that this is obviously a very different kind of game than Georgia's ever played, and a very different kind of trip than Georgia's ever taken.
Brandon, we can't thank you enough. Enjoy the rest of your trip out there. Enjoy Disney World. Enjoy your animal fries and all that. And we'll catch up with you the next couple days as we get closer and closer to these big games.
Looking forward to it, guys. Thanks for handling the show today. I'm obviously excited about what y'all do together, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
You got it, Brandon. Thank you so much. Brandon Adams, live from Pasadena, California. Last time Georgia went out to the Rose Bowl, I think they took horse and buggy out there.
Yeah, they took a train, probably.
It wasn't all this lavish stuff going on. Brandon's so excited about Georgia being out there, he can't stand himself. I'm so happy that he's got a chance to be out there, and you could hear him talking about all the lavish trip and everything that he's pushing away the sports gods.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
don't be too. Don't do it. Don't do it. I know exactly what he's doing, but we can't thank him enough. He does a great job with that. I do want to tell you about our friends at where are we at? Bookie. We're doing. You got you. Bookie.
My Bookie.
My Bookie. My Bookie's been in business for years, and the rep is rock solid. I would only recommend this service to my listeners. It's been good to me. That's why I'm urging you to make it way. My Bookie. They win, they pay. You know what you can do that's great about them? That you can make bets halfway through a game. Say you're watching a football game, and all of a sudden you see a little bit of momentum. Well, guess what? A lot of these sites you can't make mid-game wagers. My Bookie, that's not a problem. They'll do it all day long. But just use the promo code SEC Live to activate our special offer here, and they will match a 100% bonus of what you put into your account. So those are my good folks at mybookie.ag. All right, moving along. Number 3 today, we got NFL draft decisions loom large.
Yep.
Let's talk about Drew Lock first because they do play tonight.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting that he was even entertaining the idea of turning pro just because the fact he's got his senior year ahead of him. It's a great class for quarterbacks in the National Football League. You're talking about as maybe as 6 or 7 guys going in the first round. Lamar Jackson, maybe that 7th guy off the board to give you an idea of how many good guys are coming out. Drew Lock going to make a decision after the game. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that this is a difficult decision for a number of different reasons. First of all, I think Drew Lock has gotten a lot better over his career. This is a guy who really, when he was a freshman, he was almost under 50% passing, maybe like 49% passing, was kind of a gunslinger. And each year he's been a part of this program and a part of the SEC, the percentages have gone up. He climbed steadily into the upper 50%. I still think he has a lot of growing to do. But if he does decide to go pro, and I think a lot of that hinges on the fact that Josh Heupel is leaving.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge decision maker for him. So I couldn't fault him if he said, you know what, this is as high as my stock's going to be. I need to go ahead and get out of here. This is my best shot. Even if I don't get selected in the first round, I'll still get a 2nd or 3rd round grade. Also, when you look last year, there's a couple of guys in the draft that remind me of him from last year. Pat Mahomes is one of them. Pat Mahomes comes out. There's not a lot of chat about Pat Mahomes, but as soon as teams started visiting with Pat Mahomes, he starts rising up the board. You start hearing about scouts talking about him and his accuracy and his gunslinging mentality and the fact that he's not afraid to go make plays. All of a sudden, he's a first-round draft pick, and he's on to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're crowning him as the guy that's going to take over that kind of program. So a lot of ins and outs. I don't fault for Drew Lock. I don't know what I would do in his circumstances. I think I'd have to take a long sit down and look at the situation at hand. But I think if he does go, I think he gets drafted pretty high, but I don't think he's a first-round pick. And for a lot of people, that's what really makes your decision.
Yeah, so you meet with these guys before the NFL draft analysis team.
Right.
What do they call them exactly?
I can't
Something
even,
along these
yeah,
lines.
Exactly,
It's a
exactly. They're going to give you your grade.
Right. They give you your grade. They tell you where you're probably going to fit. You're either a day one draft pick, first or second rounder, I guess is how they clarify that, a middle round pick, or you need to stay.
Right.
He was given a grade that he needs to stay.
Yeah.
Well, you throw the hype in there, not to mention his senior wide receiver, number one guy. He's gone.
Yeah.
So that's got to play in the equation as well. I think it's very interesting. I'd look to see how he performs tonight without Heupel.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those guys we talked about earlier about guys sitting out. Right. He is a guy who needs to play. He needs to go out there and play and make sure these scouts have that final film on him that, hey, you know, even without this whole offensive scheme around me, even with everything going downhill, I can still go out there and perform. I think he has to be careful with the ball. I don't think the scouts want to see him go out there and make some interceptions or throw into this Texas defense. I think that he has to be careful and selective of what he does on this big stage tonight. But I think given a good performance, and listen, I've seen it firsthand. One of my teammates when I was in college, Kareem Jackson, he was not expected to be a first-round pick. By the time the draft comes around, he's running 4.40 in the combine. All of a sudden, he goes 16th overall. I think he's in his 8th or 9th year with the Texans right now. So things do work out in a good light. I think that Drew Lock has to be careful tonight. But if he does play well, I would not be shocked to see him pull that trigger.
If you can play, you can play.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, if you got your head on right and you can play, you're going to get opportunities at the next level. I will say this. If he does leave, that's a tough blow for Missouri.
It is.
That's a tough blow for Missouri, who's already lost its coordinator, their number one wide receiver. You throw the quarterback in there, a defense that was
iffy at best.
Iffy at best. That's a lot to ask of them coming up next year. A couple other guys made decisions as well. A couple defensive linemen. One's going, one's staying. We got Breland Speaks is going to be heading off to the National Football League, leaving Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Guy drastically improved his stock between
sure
last year and this year. I think maybe just going wide. You don't know what their circumstances are.
Exactly.
But I mean, this is a guy that can play. I think he could have a long career at the next level.
Right. And I look at Breland Speaks. I think he made the right decision. I think that when you look at what he brings to the team, and he obviously made a huge change in his game last year, but did the right decision to me. I don't know that anything's left for him at Ole Miss. I don't know that his stock will get any higher. I think he'll come back. I think Ole Miss struggles at times next year. That defense struggles. He was a guy to me that probably needed to make the leap because, you know what, he can get paid money right now. I don't know first-round grade, but he's going to be a high draft pick. And to me, where that program's at, even though they did retain Matt Luke, I think the timing was right.
Good news for Auburn Tigers is Dontavius Russell is coming back. That's huge for the Auburn defense. He was kind of the guy that really set the tone there in the middle for what was top 5 defense nationally all season long, especially against the run. That's a huge piece for them coming back next year that they'll continue to build on. And then no decision from Cameron Petway yet. But, I tell you one thing, if he comes back to Auburn, they might kill him.
Yeah. But yeah, why are you doing this to us right now? I think Dontavius Russell, and I think in the piece on SECCountry.com, it was listed as, hey, Kevin Steele gets an early Christmas present because I think it was huge for this Auburn staff to kind of stay intact. You've seen it, the last couple of years with Alabama losing different staff members. They give Kevin Steele back. They get everything. Chip Lindsey's going to be back. Everything's back intact. And then you start getting the pieces coming back. We made a magical run, had a great season. Don't leave us go to the NFL just yet. Obviously, a couple guys are going to make decisions. And you mentioned it, Cam Petway, Kerryon Johnson, Jared Stidham are going to make those decisions. But this one's the first one in the bucket, and this one's a big one to me with Dontavius Russell. I think he's huge in the middle of that defensive line. I think that Kevin Steele gets another toy back. And I think when you talk about projecting, I think he made the right decision to come back and try to, get his draft stock a little higher.
I think if you're Petway, I think you got to go. Running backs, you're talking. With Michelle and Chubb last year, juniors going into senior year, their situation was a little different because their arrow was pointing down. Coming back off of injuries for whatever reason, both of them made the right decision. They came back for the school and for them individually. I think Petway, to me, he's got to go. Do want to remind you, we are brought to you by AT&T. This is SEC Country Live. AT&T mobilizing your world here on SEC Country Live every day from 3 to 4. Number 4 today, continued fallout from the early signing period. Sports Illustrated names its winners and losers. We'll take a look at the graphic here. And what are your thoughts on the early signing period, by the way? I'm sure you shared it with everybody else I have.
Yeah, I think that it turned into something they didn't think it would. I think when you're the NCAA, you thought, okay, these guys that have been committed for a year, these guys that are legacy players, these guys that are definitely going to these schools, let's let them knock it out before these official visits start in January and February, and those other guys can make their decisions later. Well, you know how college, sports are. You know how head coaches are. Everybody's going to beat each other to the punch. So all of a sudden, you're pressuring these other guys to make earlier decisions. I just think it turned into something the NCAA didn't expect, and I think they're going to have to look at it in the future and try to fine-tune some things. Maybe you, create a dead period in front of this first early signing period. Do something to not make this first signing period like the second one was turning out to be. So I think a lot of fine tweaking needs to be done.
Well, one of the big signs you see it.
This is one of the winners that Sports Illustrated announced, Chris Johnson, and I think he did a good job with this, because Florida, to me, was not getting enough credit for what they were doing. And you look at it and he says, one thing new Gators head coach Dan Mullen definitely needs to kick Florida's offense into high gear right away is a quality quarterback. And he looks to have gotten one with the signing of Emory Jones, a 4-star dual threat signal caller out of Heard County, Georgia, who flipped from Ohio State. This is a guy who was looking at Alabama. This is a guy who was looking at Auburn, a few different places. Finally lands at Florida. They wouldn't, me and B.A. talked about this. You don't love Felipe Franks and a Dan Mullen offense. They had to go out and find a new quarterback. They did a good job of finding some pieces at the last minute. And to me, Emory Jones was the crown jewel of what will be a pretty good signing class under Dan Mullen. So I think that they were definitely a winner.
So one of the winners, and they reached out to Justin Fields.
Right.
And I think that's one of the more interesting storylines for so many levels. And you played at Alabama, and you saw how Nick handled his quarterbacks and made him compete, and it made everybody better. The idea that this kid, and it goes back to Fromm.
Yep.
Fromm comes to Georgia with a 5-star guy that walks on water and says, that's okay, I'm coming, I'm going to compete. Credit Kirby, for talking to him to come in there. Credit Fromm for coming in there and competing. Now Fromm's got him playing in a national semifinal, and he's talked the #1 by some quarterback in the country to come in there. Guess what? Compete. You win the job. You too can play.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a sales pitch.
Yeah, it definitely
he
is.
pulled off, man. It really is.
Yeah, Chris Johnson also had Georgia as one of their winners from signing day as well. And he says, the Bulldogs' run to the college football playoff this season has validated the wisdom of the program's decision to dismiss Mark Richt in 2015 and hire Kirby Smart. Georgia's future under Smart looks even rosier after it compiled the currently ranks as a #1 recruiting class in the country. And you mentioned it, Justin Fields. I mean, there was a lot of position players that were ranked #1 at their position. And then you put all those together, it makes the #1 signing class. And I think it's a good point to, listen, Mark Richt was getting 10-win seasons. He was getting top talent, but he was not turning the quarter like Kirby is now. And I think that this is a great signal of some things to come for Georgia, especially seeing the signing class.
Yeah, you got a little bit of what Nick did. Obviously, his years there rubbing off on him. And he's got a little bit of this new school to him, like a Dabo Sweeney approach that these kids.
He's smooth.
Right, he's smooth. So it's a little bit of both worlds, and Georgia's reaping the benefits for it. But Sports Illustrated went on to say there were some losers, however. And this is interesting, Mike. I'll get your take on this one.
Yeah, this one to me is a little bit off.
Just because the bar's been set so high.
I think that they're a victim of their own success. And they mentioned it. They were in on Emory Jones. And all these, to me, are a little bit iffy when you talk about reasons to keep them out of being in the winners category. There's still top 6 or 7 signing class, and a couple of months to go. I think they can get back into that winners category. But it mentions Nadab Joseph, it mentions Emory Jones, it mentioned the tight end that heads up to Tennessee. There were a couple of losses. And listen, BA is quick to point this out. Nick Saban hasn't been told no a lot, on the recruiting trail. He just hasn't. And all of a sudden, a couple of times, you mentioned Brenton Cox. He was told no a couple times this year. And I think that was a little bit of a kick in the pants to Alabama fans. I still don't think they were losers at signing day. I don't know if they were winners just yet. I think they're somewhere in the middle. But you mentioned a little bit of a victim of their own success.
Well, Texas A&M, Kevin Sumlin, he ends up losing his job. They bring in Jimbo Fisher on a 100-year, $5 billion contract, but he hasn't been there long enough. So for that reason, Chris Johnson's got the Aggies as losers.
Yeah, he does. And this, to me, he points out right here that this is because Texas signed the #3 class in the country heading into Christmas. And Baylor assembled #21 despite winning only 1 game this season. And we talked about a couple of those guys. The #1 player in Arkansas goes down to Baylor. Also, Bobby Brown last week, ended up decommitting from Texas A&M. I think last Wednesday or Thursday, ends up flipping to Alabama and committing to Alabama last week. So this was a little bit of a kick in the pants for Texas A&M. I think when you look across the state, and to me that's the biggest aspect, Texas getting that huge class, I think to me signified a little bit something that Jimbo Fisher needs to get things rolling in the right direction.
Well, one thing you guys didn't have a chance to hit on last week, you and I were talking before the show, LSU grabs the #1 wide receiver in the country, Terrence Marshall Jr. It's interesting to me because when I watched this offense early on in the season, I'm thinking, who in the world would want to be a wide receiver in this offense?
Yeah, well, and it was even better this year than it has been in years past.
Right.
I think this was a huge haul. And when you talk about a 5-star wideout, they looked at Pat Surtain. You're going to look at a couple of these other guys that didn't end up signing with LSU, and you wonder, who's going to be the cornerstone of this class? Who's going to be that big member, that kind of diamond heading into this next signing period? And right there at the end, right there on Friday, Terrace Marshall Jr. commits to them as a 5-star wideout. I think it's a huge haul for Ed Orgeron. I think this is a signal to the fan base that, hey, you know what? Our class is number 1 right now, but we are moving in the right direction, and we still are getting the great players that LSU's been known for.
Yeah, be interested to see. They got their big game coming up with Notre Dame here in the Citrus Bowl in just a little bit under a week. Number 5 today, the Peach Bowl here in Atlanta. It's an Atlanta tradition. I remember going as a little boy, freezing my butt off at Fulton County Stadium. Now they have to play in the friendly confines of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This year, an interesting matchup, undefeated Central Florida taking on the Auburn Tigers with a healthy camp that way, I should say. Yeah. So, a little bit of trash talking going on back and forth with these two schools already. We got some of the graphics here.
This piggybacks on to a topic that BA and I had a bunch last week. Where, listen, Scott Frost is coming out saying, we've been practicing extra days. We're more ready than Auburn is for this game. We've been putting in more work, and then it also piggybacks on everything the running back said about the SEC speed is not there. UCF has an extra gear of speed. I think this is interesting, and all of a sudden that UCF comes out and puts this billboard up in Atlanta and Eat More Tiger. It's just the trend is there. UCF is ready to talk this trash. They're ready to be on a national stage. I don't know how I feel about it as an Auburn fan. I didn't like what Scott Frost had to say. I think the running back that comes out and says that they haven't seen the speed like they're going to see from UCF, I think he's lost his mind. But I can't fault, to me, and you can add on this, I can't fault UCF for setting their sights high and saying, you know what, we're going to go in and deal with a team that won the SEC West and it beat Alabama and that beat Georgia during the season, and we're going to do our best. I don't think they can be faulted for that, and I like the fact that they're trying to get in that direction.
Well, look, for a game when this first happened, Auburn fans, of course, they wanted to win the SEC championship. Their consolation for losing the SEC championship was, of course, it was obvious it was going to be the Peach Bowl. Yep. And I remember Auburn fans saying, I don't want to come back to Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. We don't want to come anything but the Peach Bowl. Yep. Well, now you're playing an undefeated UCF. They're trying to find ways to spin it. Look who that billboard was made by, Chick-fil-A. They're doing a good job of generating interest in this football game.
I think they are. And listen, I think the tough part for me is Auburn as a football team, and having been there. Well, listen, you just got back from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You've already seen the oohs and the ahs. You thought that you were going to maybe have your way to punch a ticket into the semifinal. You were going to try to go for a national title game, but you had to let down on a big stage against Georgia. Now, how can you find that extra gear again? How can you find your way into this game against UCF with the chip on your shoulder like you're trying to climb back from some? Listen, this was an Auburn team that goes in and beats Georgia and Alabama after they already had 2 losses. They had something to climb back from. Right. They said, you know what, we sustained a loss. We don't have any room for error. Let's get back on that stage. Let's do some great things. Let's beat number 1 teams at home. Now what is it? Now, if you're Gus Malzahn, how can you get your team to play back to that level? I think that Gus Malzahn is going to have to do a great job of coaching. I think that, listen, it's easy to say UCF plays in the American Conference. Listen, they dealt with everybody they played this year. And there's something to be said. They're the only undefeated team left in Division I football. Auburn's going to have their hands full. I think they have the weapons to do it. I think the team just has to come out with the right mentality.
This game, some interesting comments coming in here in regards to the outcome of this game. I'll let you read them for yourselves, as I can't repeat most of them on the air. But if you're a casual SEC fan and you root for your other schools in these other games, this isn't the game you want to lose.
It's not.
Because there'll be all SEC haters will be pointing at this one. Look at this. And then where does UCF end up in the polls?
Yeah.
They're obviously not going to be, what do you make them, 5?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's interesting.
It is interesting, too. And listen, their AD was coming out, their president, saying, I can't believe we're not higher in these polls. How is a team that's not in the Power 5 ever going to get back from the Group of 5 to actually get in relevance? And so, listen, you guys, I'm trying to read some of your comments in the comment section. You got to get more G-rated on me if I'm going to read it on air right now. Some of you guys saying that they're going to, Cliff Nelson says Auburn's going to skull drag UCF. That's probably the most G-rated I can get on here with some of these comments. But
everybody's
a lot of War Eagles coming in, a lot of people saying, you know what, I actually want to see this game now because of the trash talk. I'm with you. I think that this game didn't signify a ton, but all the chatter coming out of UCF's corner, to me, I'm going to have to tune in and see it.
This is too funny. I know we got to move on, but I have to mention this. Several people are saying, when is this Peach Bowl happening? When I used to do radio here in Atlanta, every year I would get in trouble from Chick-fil-A by calling it the Peach Bowl. I can't help it. I'm from here. I grew up. It's the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chick-fil-A, the Chick-fil-A Bowl. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. Number 6.
I'm with you.
We talked earlier today about one national writer, I guess.
Pundit, I guess you call him.
Pundit, we'll call him.
That's nice.
My confidence level for Alabama beating Clemson was high. I feel like if I had to pick between all the games, that's the game I feel most confident in them winning for several reasons. But One Clay Travis, as he does so often, he strikes a chord with many. He says they're going to win by double digits. You can read the quote right there. We're talking about a matchup of the number 2 and 6 defenses in college football. I just don't see any points being scored early in this game, and I ultimately think Tide strangles the Clemson offense, and Bama wins this game late, pulling away 24-14. I am spot on with that analysis. Yeah. I agree with everything he said, which is not very often.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, the way he kind of brings up Kelly Bryant versus Jalen Hurts. These are two teams that, to me, are constructed very similar. I mean, they got good defensive line, good front seven, good wideouts. Sometimes the quarterback doesn't always have success getting in the ball. I do like the fact that he says, let's bracket Kelly Bryant, and I think the Alabama defense is going to do that. I think he sees it, and I don't want to speak for Clay Travis, but I'm going to kind of put my own spin on this. To me, this pans out a lot like you see the defense from Auburn going up against that Clemson offense, where they had a good front 4, good front 7, able to kind of keep Kelly Bryant pinned. He only scores a couple of touchdowns, and their defense was able to kind of hang on. I think that Alabama's defense will play at a higher level in this bowl game probably than Auburn's was back then. You're talking about 11 or 12 sacks.
Right.
Clemson's not going to get 12 sacks against Alabama in this game. It's just not going to happen. Jalen Hurts is too good of a quarterback, too mobile to let that happen. So I'm okay with 24-14. I think he's stepping out a little bit on a limb, saying double-digit, spread, but 24-14, I'm okay with that final. Obviously, I'm going to pick Bama. I'm a Bama guy, but I'm just telling you right now, 24-14. Whew. I think a lot of Alabama fans would be happy with that one for sure.
Well, last year, you guys come a little bit close. No Lane Kiffin, so obviously, questions are going to start arising. Had Lane Kiffin been calling the plays instead of Steve Sarkisian? Is it a different? It's apples and oranges because the defense they were asked. We know the situation. Well, here he is again, and it's a credit, to hiring the right people and just getting opportunities for his assistants, which I think all head coaches want to do. Jeremy Pruitt's now the head coach at Tennessee. He's going to stay on. He's going to coach in this game. How can you do both?
Yeah, I think it's tough. And, Alex Scarborough office, had this quote, what they put on ESPN.com and the SEC blog, and he said the good news is that the current situation is different, more akin to Kirby Smart's departure 2 years ago. Actually, Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart shared an office back then when Jeremy Pruitt was headed back to Alabama. When he left his post as defense coordinator, doesn't mean Alabama will beat Clemson this time around, but it should create less of an impact on players and the preparation due in large part to the fact this essentially is and has always been Saban's defense. Granted, Pruitt has control of the defense and calls plays like Smart did, but it's a playbook Saban created. If something falls through the cracks, he's going to notice it. And I love that because that's exactly the way I've kind of approached the situation. Lane Kiffin was calling Lane Kiffin's offense. For Steve Sarkisian to kind of come in and listen, Steve Sarkisian has struggled in Atlanta doing the same things, taking over somebody else's playbook. This is Jeremy Pruitt learned Nick Saban's defense. And so I think this makes the transition way easier. I think that he saw Kirby Smart do it firsthand. And I think he's approached it the right way. It's not like he's, completely thrown Alabama's defense to the wolves. He dealt with what he had to deal with in Knoxville, and he's back to business right now with this team going down to New Orleans. I like the attitude he's had approaching this game.
Number 7 today, we'll talk about suspensions for the Georgia Bulldogs. Suspension, I should say. Linebacker Natrez Patrick suspended for the game. He's in a drug facility out program or whatnot for a small amount of marijuana that was found. He obviously did not make the trip with the team. A statement from his lawyer here, and I think that this is pretty interesting. I believe he could should still be on the team. We're hoping full recovery, interesting word, and a good season next year. Natrez is receiving treatment for his personal issues, and we look forward to the completion of that treatment so we can put this behind him. That's from Billy Heelan, his attorney.
Yeah, and I think this is the right way to go. And BA and I had a pretty impassioned talk about how this needs to go. And listen, charges are dropped. There's a lot of lawyer talk about whether drug tests should have become public. And there's all this back and forth between the athletic department and his lawyers and the law enforcement down there in whatever counties they're dealing with. But I think this was the right move. I think that, listen, you're dealing with a guy's livelihood. All of a sudden, it becomes less about failing a drug test or getting arrested once when this is your fourth, involvement with marijuana, and all of a sudden your teammates are really counting on you to be a part of a game plan, counting on you to be a part of the program. And no matter what you think about marijuana or what you think about marijuana laws, the fact that he can't look his teammates in the eye and uphold his end of the bargain, to me, I think he needed to step away from the game. I think he needed to get treatment. It's not about football anymore to me. It's about making sure this guy gets the right health. And Kirby Smart, I think, echoed that. I think they all came together and probably made the right decision that he needs to worry about himself and not about football right now.
You can't get in a situation as head coach, being the overseer of the whole program of enabling these kids.
Right.
And I'm not saying he's enabling him in any way, but you're setting a precedent there where it might be okay.
Yeah.
You know, now there's no gray area. It's black and white.
Right.
You know, you do this in the future. You're part of our football program. You're not going to go on a dream trip to Pasadena. It's unfortunate for him. It's unfortunate the decision that they made that night, but I agree with you. I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, I think it is. And I love the fact that you pointed that, because this is not about, you know, hey, the charges were dropped, or hey, you know, this shouldn't have come out, or hey, you know, this thing he messed up, or the Georgia rules are messed up about. The kid has a problem.
Right.
You know, whether or not you think this should be against the law or shouldn't be against the law, he knows the rules and he can't stay away from it. And so I think they made the right move here for sure.
So he will not be participating in the game. All right, here we go. I do want to remind you guys, Hooters, who's having a little tailgate party going on for the big games? You need to talk to our good friends at Hooters. They're giving away an entire free chocolate mousse cake, Mike. It's a party pack, and you can get it today and tomorrow for the bowl game pre-orders. You get $10 off every $50 spent. And don't forget to use our promo code SEC10. This is on Hooters.com. Again, the promo code SEC10 on New Year's Day's orders. Don't forget, go to Hooters.com to place your order. All right, moving along. Number 8, Brian Stoltz released his first half of the Fan Base Pain Index on SECCountry.com.
I love this. I love this.
We could do a whole hour on this, and this is basically, Mike, just explain it for SEC Pain Index.
This is you know, in the history of football, this is the pain index for certain fan bases. And he starts to give us the first half of the list. I think the rest of the list is coming out tomorrow, and I think he's done a great job with this. Alabama listed at 0.1, and this is historically, this is everything else when we want to kind of encompass into this thing what these fan bases are going through. And I think it's interesting to look at this list. I think it's also interesting to look at what teams are left. You're going to look at Georgia, you're going to look at Ole Miss,
right.
You're going to look at Tennessee, A&M, South Carolina, UK. I don't know who's going to be number 1, but I would have to think recently that you're going to see Ole Miss up there. Mm-hmm. I think that Georgia's climbing away from that, but you're also going to look at historically the Georgia program's done. I think
but if Georgia loses to Oklahoma, they're back at number 1.
They
so,
might be.
You know,
they're still the SEC champions with the number 1 signing class. So
right. To give you.
It's going to be interesting to see it point out, and I think it's so interesting to look at, you know, 10 of 20, 9 of 20, because it encompasses not only how good these teams are, or historically how good they are, but right. what their expectations have been. You're going to look at Vanderbilt being in that list. You're going to look at Missouri being in that list. What have your expectations been, and how does everything else match up to it? I think that's where it starts to get interesting when you look at the top 10, and you're going to see Georgia, and I mentioned South Carolina. Kentucky's going to be up there at some point, Texas A&M. I can't wait to see the rest of this list. I think it's going to be interesting to look at for sure.
This is a semi-tease. We're going to get into it tomorrow. Yeah. We're expecting the first 7 to be written sometime between now and then. And if not, we'll get to it on Thursday. But we're going to take a look at the list in its entirety, and break it down from there and get some of your feedback on that. We're moving along. Number 8 now. Number 9, sorry. Damning story here, by the way, by Corey Knapp about the strength and conditioning program at the University of Florida. So not only was McElwain, he's got to be responsible for this, right?
Yeah.
Where basically Florida players were working out in small groups outside. I mean,
yeah, the quote actually comes from Andy Staples' piece in Sports Illustrated, and Corey Knapp does a good job of talking about it on SECCountry.com, but this is the quote he used. McElwain talked about having a similar organizational structure to Saban's, but he didn't inherit Saban's attention to detail. During his final year at Florida, some Gators were paying their own way to be trained elsewhere in Gainesville by former Olympian Tim Montgomery.
At least he was the Olympian.
Yeah, glaring red flag for this. And I think this is, listen, I played under Jim McElwain. I love Jim McElwain. I've talked to him up a ton of times. But one of the big things about Alabama's program is Scott Cochran, the strength and conditioning coach. And this was a huge thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago when Dan Mullen's bringing along Nick Savage, a guy he had at Mississippi State. I mentioned a couple of times on the program this year, that offensive line to me, for all the talent they should have had under Jim McElwain, they looked out of shape. They looked like they weren't as powerful as they should have been. They looked like they got slow feet in the second half, so they weren't able to finish in some of these games. Now I know why. Now it starts to come out and starts to leak out what really was the truth behind a lot of these things. And I think the Florida fans have to be breathing a breath of fresh air, knowing that somebody else will be heading up this program and they can have better results coming out of the strength and conditioning program. They should be top 5 in the country when you look at what Florida's dealing with.
It's a great analysis. I remember watching the first game of the season against Michigan, and particularly in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just going backwards.
They were winded. They really were.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, Jim McElwain spent so much time before the season started talking about how that they felt like the offensive line would be one of their strengths. They really felt like that, you know, the quarterback position was kind of up for grabs. What are you going to get out of the running backs? they really felt like they could lean on this offensive line, and it just never panned out. And the reason I thought it was is because go back and watch film, watch some of the speed rushes, watch some of these teams in the second half. Florida was playing from behind a lot, but a big reason they were doing that is because they just looked gassed. And I think that they had to get back to the drawing board. They have to allow Nick Savage to get back to work and do some of the things that have made them successful in the past by getting this program back on track. I don't know Nick Savage's track record, but I know Dan Mullen knows what it takes to be successful in the SEC. And I think he'll get him pointed in that direction.
If you're a head coach, you just want to delegate. You want somebody else. The last thing in the world, if I'm a head coach, is I got to worry about guys coming in shape.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Somebody else worry about that. Hopefully it's getting taken care of and they're not training with Olympians out on the freeway somewhere.
Actually, you know what? I'll credit the guys because, you know, before Coach Saban got to Alabama, it was like, hey, you know what? We're going to go in here and get this work. And a lot of times we were exhausted. Sometimes we weren't. But I got to tell you, I never thought about going and hiring a personal, fitness instructor outside of the program. That just never popped in my head. I thought you just always got extra work. If some of these guys were paying their own way, saying, man, if we want to get to the NFL, we're not getting enough work here.
Right.
You got to credit them. I think that points to a little bit of leadership. Just wasn't coming from Jim McElwain.
But man, you look good. You've been working. Yeah, I've been doing this thing with this Olympian guy. Whatever.
Yeah, you know what's funny is the fitness guy that was the strength and conditioning guy that was at Florida. He's probably looking at these guys and going, yeah. Picked up a couple of tenths of a second on his 40. He's running a lot faster. Turns out they're training with Montgomery over there across town. Just an interesting situation for sure. I'm glad. I think Florida fans are glad that that's behind them.
All right, number 10, last but not least, Nick Suss hands out gifts as he would to LSU players for this season.
Yeah, I think this is interesting too because at LSU, obviously, when you look at some of these guys, Darius Geis knee brace, Rashard Lawrence, Popeye's spinach, Danny Helling with the Michael Vick jersey. He needs a little bit of mobility when you talk about some of the things he's going to bring to this bowl game against Notre Dame. Defensive back, jug machine. Arden Key, clean bill of health. We still don't know if we're going to see him. I think he's sitting out of the bowl game due to some of the injury concerns he has. This brought up a couple of different things for me looking around the SEC that you could do this for every team. You could hand out some of these things. I looked at Jake Fromm. I said, you know what? If I'm giving him a present, I'm giving him 100-yard rushing games by Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb. That's just not asking him to do a ton. Yeah. I think you look at Mississippi State Nick Fitzgerald. He could use maybe an ankle brace himself. I think that nursing himself back to health coming into next year will be a big deal for that program as well. I think that you can hand out these superlatives and these gifts for a lot of teams around the SEC.
I think Brett Bielema needs a vacation. He needs to go to one of these.
Can we even include him in the SEC
the all-inclusive resort, it's got your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. You go to the beach with the kids all day. He does. I mean, they've just been beating that guy up for 3 years. I feel bad for you, Coach. Best of luck to you moving forward.
Yeah.
And then last but not least today, we have our Darius Geis.
I think we're going to do the look ahead first, I believe. The look ahead we're going to do for the bowl game tonight. Obviously, you guys know the look ahead. Not a lot to look ahead other than today, Missouri versus Texas. I'm so glad that SEC bowl season is here.
Finally.
Can't wait to watch this one come on the TV tonight on ESPN. I think it's going to be a great matchup. I think that Missouri is going to light up the scoreboard. Can't wait to see what they do. It's a rekindling matchup of a couple of Big 12 teams for sure.
Right, and then Drew Lock set to make his decision after the game. I'm sure the decision's already been made. It's not going to be like he's in the fourth quarter. He's going to throw an interception and be like, nah, I need to come back.
You know what? I scratch that. I'm headed back. You know what? I know I already sent that contract to the agent, but scratch that if you could, tear that apart.
Clearly, I didn't see the defender jump that route. I do want to thank you guys for watching SEC Country Live today. Brought to you by AT&T, mobilizing your world here each and every day on SEC Country Live. And then last but not least, something cool from Darius
We'll
Geis.
go to the champion of life. And you guys know this is usually a funny segment, but I think we had to go serious this time. We just got done with Christmas. Got to give a shout out to Darius Geis. This is he spent his Christmas, or I guess the day before Christmas, hanging out with a little girl named Alexis over there in Baton Rouge, or South Baton Rouge, New Orleans. Hanging out with her, getting to sign her ball, hanging out with her family. I think they were connected through Twitter, and he's able to step up to the plate. I mean, these are the stories to me that you don't hear about. Everybody talks about what's wrong. Natrez Patrick's drug suspension, or a couple of guys getting DUIs.
Right.
These are the stories that LSU fans can be proud of with Darius Geis, and he's standing up and doing things in and out of the community. And you got to be proud of the guy. I think it's a good look for him, and he actually is a great champion of life today.
He's about to be a rich champion of life. I was looking at because of the Cam Petway deal. I was looking to see at running backs, and he's one of the 2 or 3 expected to go in the first round. Yeah. Your first round running back, you're about to get paid.
Yeah. They don't happen often anymore.
No,
they do. and make a lot of money. So especially with the shelf life of running backs right now, I think that he has to be one of those guys that's looking at going pro. So.
And when he got healthy, LSU season sure turned around, didn't it?
Yeah, sure did.
All right, Mike, it's been a lot of fun, man. We'll be back here tomorrow doing it again. Thanks to Brandon Adams for joining the program from Pasadena. I think we're going to have him join the program again tomorrow and the next day, so we'll get to do that again. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thank you to everybody behind the glass. Outstanding job to everybody, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much.